I want to say thank you for coming on, and not just for doing this, brother, but I'm a really big fan of the Dandies. I've been a fan since like the early 2000s. You know, got multiple of your records. Um, I've met Zia before when she did a podcast here in New York City, and then that night I caught you guys at Webster Hall. This was, I think, 2024. Uh, an
We call that
amazing,
last year.
yeah. Amazing show, man. Amazing show. So it's a trip, dude, for you to be able to come on and do this, especially in the cut, because like this was like, I mean, we probably reached out to you 3 hours ago, maybe. So I appreciate you
Well,
taking
yeah,
time out of the tours. Where are you right now? So you're in Tempe. Are you guys on the road? Like, what's going on?
yeah, we started a week ago. This is exactly day 8, I think. What day is it? Tuesday.
Dude, I don't
Yeah, we left. Yeah, we started in Salt Lake on Tuesday. You know, it's a tour where there are 100+ bands that are all psych rock, shoegaze, Britpop, or adjacent, all like a swirling drain, swirling around Levitation Festival, which is probably the greatest psych rock festival in the world. But it brings all these bands that are really similar and have a similar audience into one region, which is the Southwest. So we're all playing Dallas, Houston, Santa Fe, Phoenix, whatever, and I can't. I'm surprised we're selling as many tickets as we are. I think it's in part due to having Kula Shaker on the bill with us, because they're also like class of '96. I think they started having hits in '96 that were also kind of psychedelic, and um, so it may perhaps it's not a generational thing actually, because we're getting um, you know the '90s are back, so we're
Yeah,
getting
baby.
teenagers hundreds by the hundreds, and they're cool. It's cool because it does feel like the '90s because they're wilder than middle-aged fans.
Sure.
Their bodies go up in the air, stage divers, the crowd surfing, the whole bit, and it really started this year for us. We played the Balkans, and we were pretty blown away at the just over the top energy of the new generation of fans.
Well, I think music, like you said, is kind of in a circle. It's like, it's always how it's been, where it's like, even just not bringing it up as a band from the '90s, but like having to go and seen Oasis a few times while I was in London, and if they just would have kept playing straight through, like who knows if they'd be even remotely as popular as they are now. But there is something about that, like mid to late '90s rock, early 2000s, like everybody's starting to kind of have like this come up again with the younger generation. Like, dude, like Corn and System of a Down, the metal bands, Limp Bizkit's having, dude, fucking even Corey Feldman is making it work right now. I mean, I don't even know if we're going to see some of his music because it's great, but it's just, maybe it's just the shit show. But still, it's like there's something about, like, the whether it's the clothes or the music, it definitely, it's the same thing with like what you guys doing, in a sense, like almost like some of the psychedelic influence that you had, like, from the 60s and the 70s, like the Moby Grape, or like, who is it, Quicksilver Messenger Service. Like, we did records, and it's crazy being able to hear some of that music into some of the music, not just that you guys have made, but some of your contemporary bands. I mean, would you agree?
I guess so. I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. I mean, not that I would know a Moby Grape song that hit me in the head. Uh, or Quicksilver, for that matter, either. We, my friends and I, we kind of grew up with what everybody grew up with, which would have been the Doors, CCR,
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. That was the '60s. But I've always kind of been a Anglophile as far as the influences. So, I have every Who record I could get my hands on as a kid, and obviously Sgt. Pepper and psychedelic Beatles stuff.
Sure.
So, and I was exactly the right age for MTV. I started playing downtown, and the first real new wave looking and sounding band, and we were 15 and 16 years old, playing at Satyricon, which years later, when we were almost grown-ups, well, we were grown-ups, by age, we were like Kurt and Courtney, and that's where the Portland punk scene happened. The Wipers and all that, and Napalm Beach. Those were the bands that were there. So that had an influence as well, just on the amount of grit that we always felt the need to leave into our records. We couldn't quite make a record that was going to be slick enough to really break through and have a lot of hits on it in America. In the rest of the world, we had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 top 40 singles over a decade on Capitol Records. That was cool, and really only Monkey House was the slickest record. We made that with Duran Duran, Rhodes and Simon, and Nile Rodgers is on it. But we've always been we're a stoner, LSD tripper, 60s thing, but through the grunge and indie angst rock era.
Mm-hmm.
So we have and Portland, Pacific Northwest. So we have a pretty unique sound, and always have. We don't really have a lot of bands that sound like us.
Not at the time when, like, especially like, with the first 3 records, I mean, you got them 95, 97 and 2000, like you said, into Welcome to the Monkey House in 2003. I mean, it's really just like you guys were driving down your own lane. And I found out you guys from 13 Tales from Urban Bohemia. I mean, it's damn near a perfect record, no skips, and so, which is not surprising, because I want to steer this real quick into Blondie. And when we reached out, they said that you and your guitarist Peter, especially Peter, is like a diehard Blondie fan. So, like you were talking about growing up during the. Go ahead, bud.
He's read the books, the biographies and the autobiographies. I have not. I don't really read autobiographies or biographies of rockers. He does. So, but I think he's probably a little too uptight about perfection and details to want to do this interview. I asked. He said, "Give me 3 days, and I'll definitely do it." But we had 3 hours.
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. Can I be completely clear and just be completely transparent? For like weeks, we had Blondie, Debbie Harry booked to do it, and then my schedule got so shitty because I was on tour in Europe, and then I got back and immediately went to the Middle East for shows. And so when they couldn't work with that, which was literally yesterday, we had found out. And so then we started throwing out the bat signal. So to be able to score you, Courtney, is a gift. So thank you so much for coming on. And it doesn't make a difference. I mean, because you're obviously a fan of Blondie, right? Like when your love or just whatever, when did that start?
I grew up on Blondie,
Yeah.
And because I was in our suburban school, there were 3 of us, Harold, Nelson, and myself, and we were the Wavos. We were the ones, who listened to, bought the vinyl records of, the B-52s and of course the Blondie records. Blondie was, like Parallel Lines came out when I was maybe in the 5th grade. And I kind of knew then. I mean, when I saw Blondie on Saturday Night Live doing Heart of Glass, it definitely would have affected me. That was the most intense sort of art sexuality I'd ever seen. And getting to school on the following Monday, I heard some of the jocks and the popular kids talking about it, and I gleefully marched towards them in the otherwise empty corridor, and I then heard that they were horrified by this vampire woman with the fangs and the blacks in the back of her hair, and I knew then it was me against them. And that's sort of how it was for, the rest of my young life until I moved downtown, and paid my way through college by being a janitor at a strip club, shit like that.
Wait. We have the connection. I was not a janitor. I was a strip club DJ for many years. Well, 6 years in Los Angeles. And if I'm not mistaken, Portland has the most strip clubs per capita than any city in America. I know they're in the top 3. I think like Tampa's up there.
Historically,
and the best.
It might not be true anymore, but I'm sure 10 years ago, you couldn't throw a rock. Without a strip club.
What is that like being a janitor at a strip club? Because being the DJ, especially a DJ in like when I was doing it, which was like 2009 through 2015. I mean, it was a totally different world. Like just like the music, like wait, were you in the heydays, like the pour some sugar on me?
That would have, yeah, that would have been the 80s. Yeah, it would have been the late mid 80s, 87, maybe 86. And well, you just let yourself in. It takes about 2 hours. Minimum wage was about $3.50 an hour, maybe then. Maybe
livable back then.
Yeah, and I was getting $20 an hour. No, I was getting $25 an hour. I'd get $50, and I'd just show up anytime between after midnight when they closed. There was no alcohol. It was an all ages or 18 and older strip club, and you just get out the shop vac and put on the rubber gloves up to your elbows and just hold your nose and vacuum and mop and squeegee the organ prints off the mirrors and brasso the poles, and that was kind of it. It took about, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours. I always smoked a lot of weed. It was funny. My girlfriend at the end of that run, but it was great money. It was 6 nights a week, anytime before noon, finish before noon, start after midnight. And I got a call from my girlfriend Alex at the time, and she said, "Are you going to work tonight?" And I was like, "God, why are you waking me up? What time is it?" And she goes, "What? You don't know? Turn on the TV." So I turned on the TV, turned on channel 6 or 8, whichever the local one was. And there's the front of the club with the cops, the strippers, zip-tied hands with their faux fur coats and their high heels. And it got busted for prostitution and racketeering. And that's where I got my first guitar. Somebody had left it there, and so I stuck it in the janitor's closet, put a note on the DJ booth for the manager, said, "If anyone comes in looking for this guitar, it's in my janitor closet." No one came, and then the place got busted, locked up. So I went down there and just grabbed that guitar, probably some cleaning products, toilet paper, paper towels, and started me on guitar, because I was a drummer and a percussionist for my entire
right on
life. I went to music college, and I had to write charts and played in marching band in high school and symphony in junior high. I probably started learning to read music at 9 years old. So by the time I put the band together, I didn't want any real musicians in the band. I didn't want any bad habits. So I played guitar. I switched from drums to guitar. You know, my cousin is he's an actual guitar player and an actual singer. Peter is an actual painter with a degree from NYU, and it says so. And Zia worked at the coffee shop and was the coolest chick. And so we all learned how to, which is probably why we don't sound like anyone else, is we just didn't have the skills to imitate anyone accurately. So we kind of just fudged our way into being a composer who could handwrite charts out for, I think my graduating project was like 10 instruments, and it was a jazz college. So I knew that we could just get it on with 3 chords, 2 chords, 1 chord, 4 chords, whatever. And the point from being a drummer is just the groove, a perpetual groove, and that's what I wanted, with enough chord changes, vocal harmonies, to have emotional content to keep the groove, thrilling and incessant and psychically and sexually and emotionally, like a series of doors opening into progressively more and more wonderful rooms, and then 5 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever, it sets you back down, and next song. We do a lot of jamming live.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I saw it at the Webster Hall show, and it's great. We just want to introduce you. We got our one of my writers, my main writer, Morty Coyle, is here. He's going to be helping us out. He's a fan of yours as well, and a huge fan of Blondie. So he'll be filling in the holes that I might miss. But before I get into the album, do you still have that guitar from the strip club? I got to know.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, I love that. I love that.
Wrote
4 albums with it.
Yeah, I did. I slept.
Oh, I love that.
So that I could wake up in the middle of the night and, oh God, it's coming to me. The subconscious is the better writer. The subconscious is the better artist.
When you were doing music in school, were you primarily working on percussion stuff, or did they have you doing composing and orchestration across the board?
There was a little bit of composing and orchestration. Mostly you learn things like sight singing and ear training, being able to just look at a series of lines and dots on a page and sing the melody.
Oh, word.
And I really got into, when I was about 14, they invented the 4-track cassette recorder. The
Tascam, Fostex.
Fostex was the first one, yeah. 2 left and right going one way on a tape, and left and right going the other way on the other side of the cassette. You could go 4 tracks in all one direction. So you drums, bass, guitar, bounce those over to the other track, to the 4th track. That opens up 3 tracks. Now those 2 tracks, you can put another guitar and a keyboard, put those on that track, and so I learned how to record. So once I got into music college, I really focused on the recording engineering process. Also, MIDI was new, sampling was new, so I got into the keyboard synthesis and all that studio integration, and I just learned the important part is not being a great live band at that point. The important part was making this CD that could go out into the world without you having to be there, go out on the radio and whatever. Recording, since the invention of recording, has been the more important part of the job. So I did a lot of that, and that's what I remember. It was an eternity ago. It was 40 years ago. So, I can't remember what I did in my daily life there, except for the recording part, having Ensonic ESQ1 maybe keyboard
With the old discs.
Yeah.
That's a keyboard. It's a keyboard that had you could essentially sort of make your own sounds and stuff. My cousin was, just to give my
Yeah.
quick bona fides, I've been in bands my whole life. We're about the same age. So we probably have mutual friends and a lot of sort of, even when I was doing the research for this, I was like, oh shit, I got to bring up like this thing and that thing. So it'll probably come up organically. But I've been a singer in bands and everything my whole life, and we were signed around the same time you guys were. To other labels too. So I've also seen your career, and I knew, the Brian Jonestown guys and stuff. So I also saw your career from a perspective of like a contemporary. At the same
Right,
time, in following, I DJ'd at a club called Bang, which was an 18 and over club in LA. And right about the time that Bohemian sort of broke, and it was around the same time like Britpop was really happening. So, and I just saw Pulp the other night, and I was going to say there are a lot of similarities I sort of saw between, at least in the ethos. So, yeah, I mean, so just so you know, when you refer to some of that stuff, and I know Josh is a singer as well. We kind of know like what you're talking about and appreciate that. I didn't realize how
Yeah.
studied you were at the time because you gave off such this great feeling of this being a garage, almost like a garage rock project that
Yeah,
the fact
well,
that you
we were.
yeah.
That's why we were all playing instruments that were not schooled at. I literally was horrified by the, bending a little guitar note, like people that would do that, or bass players that had that skinny '90s sound. We just kind of, Peter and I just sort of, decided that we weren't going to get people that knew how to play their instruments. We got people that kind of grew up with instruments around them, but not Brent never played in bands or symphonies or marching band or anything as a drummer. He just played in garage bands, but mostly he just sat around with his friends learning Beatles songs and shit on guitar and singing, and he sang in choirs and all through schooling. So he is a great vocal arranger. He's fantastic, and he's a songbird, a perfect singer. And I am a not perfect singer.
I don't know. I mean, I definitely have appreciated your contributions. Like there was another one of the bands you guys that was like, there was an emulation of Cool, which I think with Blondie, there's such a big part of the Blondie thing where you're like, yeah, but they're cool, and like, I mean, if you want to just talk about the thing and get into the record, because there's some,
Well,
this is the record.
This is the record. This is the undeniable breakthrough record. This is due in part to the band's willingness to span genres, unlike some of the band's contemporaries. While it definitely still has the punk and new wave qualities that got them noticed, they also crossed over into the mainstream with one of their most accessible songs that saw them flirting with the disco popularity of the time. Third record is what kind of is, this is the one that broke them. So there's two records before. Were there just no hits on those first two records, Morty?
No, they had already like sort of established themselves. Well, the first record is sort of I think I believe they worked with what's his face from Gotterer, the guy who worked with the Go-Go's on their first album, and part of the Strange Loves, from the three guys that wrote. We've done this on the girl group episode, where they were the guys that did I Want Candy, and he had a very, I think people thought, oh, we have a chick in the band, it'll be like kind of a punky girl group type thing, and they were started growing by then. Mike Chapman did this record.
No, wait a second. You just named I Want Candy. That's probably 82.
No, the Strange Loves version, the original.
Oh, okay. What year was that?
65, I think.
So that's
because
like
the
Motown. Like Motown's
Yeah.
still going strong. The Beatles had put out Revolver, and we're heading towards something more interesting.
Yeah, they were Rubber Soul into Revolver, and the thing was, these guys, the three guys, just blanked on their names. Richard God, it was Gotterer and whatever. They went on to do the Go-Go's first album, one of the Cats, and they were part of like they were songwriters and producers, and they would just come up with bands. So the Strangeloves, they pretended to be Australian surfer guys. Then they put together this band just so they could put out a single. And so they would do things like this. And then that was the first Blondie album was produced by Richard, I think Richard Goderer is his name. I just blanked. But Mike Chapman did this record. And Mike, we actually worked with him on the second record. So he used to tell us stories about, well, I mean, with the Blondies. And so Mike Chapman, so just to give you guys a heads up on who this guy is who produces this record, he produced The Sweet. He wrote Ballroom Blitz. He was part of Chinny Chap, which was Nicky Chin and Mike Chapman together. They did Susie Quattro's stuff. Those songs, either written or produced, and both. Did My Sharona for the Knack.
That is a stunner of a track.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Amazing. And that drummer became like the hottest session drummer in America after that single, because it's
thundering.
He's so sticky and tight. He's clearly a monster.
Yeah, that and he did Mickey for Tony Basil. He did what was the other one?
Mickey's a great track. I just went down that rabbit hole and checked out, listened to Mickey for an afternoon 10 times or something.
And here's a great thing with that. My old friend Rick Parnell was the drummer on that, who, by the way, he just passed away a couple years ago, but he was also the drummer in Spinal Tap at the time.
Which one that died? The last one?
He's the last one.
Oh,
he really died.
My favorite drummer.
He was also in Atomic Rooster with his brother back in the 60s. But yeah, Rick played on Mickey, like one of those weird claim to fames of like, yeah, I'm in Spinal Tap, but I'm also the drummer on Mickey. And it was like, that's a real thing? Like that. I was like, wow. But yeah, I was going to say on Bohemian, there's definitely a quality of that sort of, that thumping glam rock sort of thing there that I thought was reminiscent.
Yeah, certainly Ballroom Blitz was a big deal to me as a kid. That was one of my favorite songs for a good few years. But yeah, getting back to Parallel Lines, that's one of those, almost half of those songs were our radio staples, from Sunday Girl to obviously One Way or Another and Heart of Glass those were the super powered, they just attached themselves to radio and stayed there for the rest of eternity. And then, Sunday Girl is great. I live in Portland, so our radio station still plays. I can't remember what all, Hanging on the Telephone. What else? Sunday Girl. Yeah, I remember that there are 5 or 6 hits. Can you name what's the big?
This is the banger. We could jump into the record and start.
It starts off. Yeah, it starts off with Hanging on the Telephone, which I didn't get into later with them. A lot of people don't realize that this second single was a cover of a song by the short-lived West Coast power pop The Nerves, which featured the song's writer, guitarist, and vocalist Jack Lee, as well as drummer Paul Collins, who would go on to lead American band The Beat, and bassist Peter Case, who would start the Plimsolls, a million miles away from Valley Girl. Blondie discovered the song after musician Jeffrey Lee Pierce would later form the beloved cult band The Gun Club sent them a cassette. Although the Nerves had already broken up, Blondie covering both this and Will Anything Happen on this record was a blessing. As Jack Lee recalled, he was really broke.
The Telephone is The Nerve, or one way or the other?
Yeah, it's The Nerves. It's their first song off their first EP.
Okay.
Yeah, and Jack Lee recalled. So weird. He said he was really broke when Blondie called to ask permission to cover the songs. He said, I remember the day vividly. It was a Friday. They were going to cut off our electricity at 6:00 and the phone too. So luckily that phone call went right at the exact moment. What a great way to open this record. I mean, it
goes from that into One Way or Another, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does. Also with that with that thing at the front, they were on the fence about Mike Chapman was like, oh, I'll put like a telephone sound effect at like the front of the thing. And they were kind of like, I don't know. Like, is that a little kind of,
A
cheesy?
little much.
Yeah, like it's sticky to use, especially because it's such a strong song. But the fact that this is the band that had this not happen, like who knows, maybe the Plimsolls, wouldn't have happened. Where you get Peter Case and and his stuff, and even the beat, which is the reason that the beat with UK, the reason the English beat has to be called the English beat is because of the American band called the beat. Out here. So it's just really wild that these guys have 2 songs on an album by a band that, could write their own material. Like it's kind of wild that a band would take. I mean, just think
we're
of that.
about to release. Yeah. We're about to release our. I think we got our hands on every cover we've ever done. So certainly a prolific songwriting band still loves other bands, other songs, and there's, you get asked a lot, what song do you wish you wrote, and there is no great artist that would say, no great songwriter or terrible song, say, none, I wrote all the songs I wanted to write. It's just impossible. Yeah, so covers are an incredibly fun thing to do. You feel really you feel cooler than yourself, because you don't know this other person and their trip. You just know their song, and it's something that made you probably feel real cool earlier in your life.
Are there any covers that? Sorry, hold on. Is there any covers that you guys have in your set currently that you always have in the rotation that you do in the set list?
No.
Oh, interesting.
We get a Swoon 23 song called Pussycat Fingertips that we bang out, and if a crowd is really going mental when we walk off stage, say goodnight, and it's a very occasional, we play a long time, we make it pretty obvious that we're not coming back on. But if they do, we'll play The Last Time by the Rolling Stones.
There you go.
Interesting. All right. One way or another, you already mentioned it. I mean, this surf rock inspired track was written by bassist Nigel Harrison and Debbie, who based it on her former bandmate and ex-boyfriend who became so much of a stalker that she had to move out of her adoptive hometown of New Jersey. Although the song reversed the roles and added some playful menace and levity to the lyrics, it came from a pretty dark place, which is interesting because you could kind of hear it, but it's such a fun song. It's such a rocker that you didn't even you almost forget that the lyrics even exist. You just feel the energy and just, yeah. Thoughts on this?
It also embodies new wave. It really feels like, and for 1978, you got to understand that, Pat Benatar and Foreigner were huge, and that's just it's not anything like that. It's tougher. It's more art school. It sounds like weirder people doing it, and it was huge, groundbreaking. I remember being on the playground at the end of the school day, in 5th grade, and somebody's got a radio, and that song is just screeching out of a little AM radio, and even that, horrible, sonic version of it was just, what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
Blondie, man.
By the way, Mike Chapman also produced the Pat Benatar record, right around that same time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Pat Benatar never really sounded like real rock to me.
He did Love is a Battlefield, and he did.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like rock. It has guitars doing dangerous. It's got that kind of danger rock thing.
Yeah.
City streets, the heat. And yeah, even as a kid, it just kind of rang as like older, like adult rock. You know, mom says it's okay rock, and it's not. It wasn't truly. It never sounded truly dirty. So it's interesting that it's not the producer. It is actually the nature of the band, how they put their pieces together, what guitar tones they use, how the singer sings. You know, Debbie didn't sing like anybody else that I had ever heard. That was something that was really different.
She definitely can go from the falsetto to the growl in like one song. I mean, really, she had. That's a big thing about this too, is that when you listen to this record as a whole, because most people listen to greatest hits, and a lot of the songs on here are on the greatest hits, but then you forget Rapture came out this many years later, and then, you know, Denise is like earlier. So it's hard to sort of think of like, you know, when you look at a retrospective of an artist, it just feels like the horizon is like this. Oh yeah, everything they did was in like 6 months. But it's like when you see the growth of this band, I mean, also changing members and adding people, when you see the growth of this band from being like, you know, a band that played CDs in New York with other kind of punky bands and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they break like big, you know, which we'll get to, you know, when the song comes up, but you know, that they evolved even as players, you know, from even just this new wave, whatever you would call new wave or punk. You know, they are absolutely contemporaries of the punk scene. I mean, they were together in 74, 75, you know, like when all of this was happening. So they predate punk rock. They're in the, you know, in the New York Dolls sort of era of music.
Right, they're the same age as the Dolls almost, yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
You know, and we're contemporaries.
Glam was
like
the art.
legitimate.
Glam was the artsy form of rock at that time. Glam. And obviously, you know, glam was a very short-lived thing because country and then disco came on in that order, and just kind of wiped out, you know, rock until punk and new wave, you know.
Yeah. By the way, happy Mark Bolan's birthday to all glam rockers who celebrate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know, I talk about one of the gods of that. So yeah, you want to talk about with this
picture this?
With one way or the other, the only thing I was going to ask is, you guys have, you know, just being on the outside and not knowing the whole story, stuff like The Last Junkie on Earth and things, they seem to come from a place of knowledge, or at least, I mean, you're called the Dandy Warhols, so there's already going to be the overview of there being sort of like a factory sort of artsy quality to what you guys are doing, and you have Dandy in your name. So, you know, I always assumed, even when I heard about you guys before I actually heard the band, I was trying to put together what this band would be, because it had like, you know, sort of the New York thing and then the Dandy thing, which is a glammy kind of quality, even if that wasn't the intention. But then when The Last Junkie on Earth, I was like, these guys write like Morrissey titles, like great, like intriguing. I want to listen to this song because I want to know what this is about. Was that darkness, did it come from real life like experiences from the people you knew around you?
Yeah, we went on our first tour, and you know, it was just 8 days or 7 days down the coast in a van, and back then the days just lasted forever. I mean, it was the longest days of my life. Everything was new and fresh. It was so exciting and great. I came back, and my girlfriend of about 3.5 years had shacked up with the singer of my previous band, which is the last drumming I did in a band. And he had kicked me out and stole my previous girlfriend, and so now he's got my two fucking girlfriends, and they're shooting smack, and the one that we were just kind of ending because of the tour and the band and everything, she shows up at my house like a drowned rat in the rain with a brown paper bag with a rig and a king size Snickers and they get the dough with the plastic thing, and it comes out of the dude's mouth under the bridge, and you put it in your lip in case you get busted. rolled over. You got to sit in plastic, your little wad of dope. And it was just like, oh my God. And she just chewed me a new one for not caring about her enough and whatever. And now you're in this band and da 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 da. And then she marched off to the bathroom to slam some smack and eat a giant Snickers. And when she came out, man, she was a terror. And the last thing she said as she slammed the door and left was, and V-neck sweaters aren't even cool anymore.
That's a great line. Such a great line.
Yeah, I was wearing this mod sweater with, the brown, big brown V-neck, trim on the V-neck. And heroin isn't even cool anymore. It's like Vogue magazine, probably that month that it put out a heroin chic, photo fashion spread. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
I remember that
so
era.
pretty. Oh my God. They're gorgeous. 14-year-old girls with painted on veins and pink, strung out look in the woods with wedding dresses, like Victorian wedding gowns on. I was just like, oh. So yeah, that's where that came from. I wasn't about to give 1 inch of emotional sympathy to that shit.
Yeah, it was difficult. I had a junkie ex-girlfriend who died around the time that, I mean, I don't mean to be, but I remember at that time too, because it was in LA, there was a huge heroin sort of epidemic, portions of people that got into it all around the same time.
Seattle, Portland.
Oh yeah.
We didn't even have sun. We only had rain back then.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I in my 20s, I lost one acquaintance or friend every year to heroin and sometimes suicide. I was horrible. And then I put that song out, and that got globally big enough to where the commercial industry of style and fashion sort of quit. Once somebody poked their little turtle head up and said, "This is stupid," not "This breaks my heart." When you stick that spike in your vein, you stick a spike in my heart. They didn't approach it like that. It's just like, that's not even cool. It's stupid. You're pathetic. Get a life, and to have that kind of attitude.
It was tough love. Yeah,
it definitely worked.
Yeah.
It worked to clear it out of the industry. I didn't have to see it in magazines and fashion photo spreads anymore. So that was cool.
That's what I thought. That was a great part of that song. I mean, it was also a fun song, but that was a thing. I was like, man, what a sentiment. It wasn't
and I remember
patronizing.
Some other artists, that were probably junkies in England on talk shows and stuff, bad mouthing it as saying he doesn't understand the pain. And when you're with people that have drug problems, you have to be sympathetic. And I was just like, how about fuck yourself with a sword, first of all? You don't know my fucking life. And you're not listening to the lyrics, idiots. So it was rough because I had to be snotty about it. I wasn't going to be sympathetic or, like, fuck this guy and fuck my 2 ex-girlfriends, like, have a nice junky time. And they all ended up miserable in their lives and very regretful that they all kind of ganged up to try to, hurt me emotionally and show me. And, and yes, they did. It hurt. All 3 of those fuckers broke my heart. And so, yeah, I got to travel the world because of the pain they caused me. So, I feel like I was gratified in the end, but then watching them deteriorate in their lives was not a joy whatsoever. That was when I was really sad and tried to help out, which is a dead end street, trying to help a junkie. Are you kidding? 3 junkies. Yeah.
Until they're ready to.
Anyway, sorry, I got them all.
No,
worked
no,
up.
no, no.
No,
Just
that's
Really
real.
weird I
No,
did that.
yeah.
yeah.
Right. Let's
Well,
get back to parallel lines now.
Let's go back to Parallel Lines. How about we talk about Picture This, which is the debut single, is the first slice of girl group style pop heaven that will appear later on the record. Co-written by Debbie, keyboardist Jimmy Destry, and guitarist Chris Stein. This has Debbie cooling and growling with lyrics about her desire for a perfect life with simple pleasures, which include watching Stein, her partner at the time, showering. This was the first single. This is the one that they kicked this off with.
This was a photograph. Yeah, God, so beautiful. What a cool track.
And what's wild about this is because I was going to say the thing about the image, because, you know, the cover of this album is iconic. I mean, even Blur did a piss take of it where you've got, you know, the guys in the band in their skinny ties looking like Reservoir Dogs against this parallel. And then and then Debbie in her white dress, just absolutely pulling focus. You'd see it again and again in bands where it had this dynamic, but the guys were, you know, sort of almost like relegated. And I always wondered, and on the cover of this actual single, she's like licking the vinyl and it's just her, you know, which makes it's almost like when Mark McGrath jokes about being called Sugar Ray, where everybody just called her Blondie because she's Blondie, obviously, you know, it's her.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's a band and that, you know, that everybody in the band contributed and really wanted to. But when you guys, because you have, I don't mean to be fawning, but I mean, the banana on the cover is, you know, homage to both, you know, almost like Apple Records, but also like, you know, Velvet, you know, Underground.
Well,
And
what,
then,
what it is, it's unzipping. It's not unpeeled.
Yeah.
It's unzipped. So it's the 2 rock record covers that Andy did.
right. And it's like Sticky Fingers and that, you know,
It's
together.
Sticky Fingers and Nico.
Yeah, and then you have, you know, but even the early stuff with the way the typography across the page, the image, how important, because you said you kind of came from a different ethos as far as what you were putting together, but I always felt that there was an artistic quality to the band from the beginning where, you know, the videos, all of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I directed all of them. I love film, and I really got attached to the making of film through MTV, watching the art of a 4-minute film come to fruition during those early 80s years. And I really got into filmmaking. So I directed, I guess, all of them except the David LaChapelle one. And that one, you know, he was a still photographer who was still is a mind-blowing photographer.
Absolutely.
Way ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
I just checked in last year with checked out what his latest stuff he's been doing. And it doesn't look like anybody. He's way ahead of everyone still. He's a fantastic artist. But, you know, he had never made a motion picture before. So Capitol had to seize the footage and, you know, we went in and edited it. And that's, you know, that's like I'm the goalie at that point, because whenever I have worked with other people, I still end up editing. It's just something about the pacing, and it could be my life as a drummer.
Yeah.
The simplest rhythm and short attention span, but not that short. Not like if you watch the Ramones at the Roseland, right? That's a bad edit. That is like, I want to look at Dee Dee for 3 more seconds. I want to look at Joey for 3 more. You know, it's there. That was a misinterpretation of the MTV era's editing ethic.
Right.
And,
cut too quickly. Right.
Yep.
Make it exciting.
They thought it was exciting, you know,
Right.
and it wasn't. It actually turns out it's boring.
But I love the fact that you're so invested in, not that people aren't, but that you're so invested. I think we kind of come from an era where the DIY, but also once we're given the opportunity, we're so invested in what we put out there. It's not just we throw it away to like, oh, we'll just get the guy that does the thing that he does, and that you're actually there and hands-on. Because I mean, this really is your career, our career. You know, when we talk about what we do, you know, we live or die by our artistic statement, you know, and so that's why I'm like, you know, you never want to feel like it was taken away from you. I'd rather die on the merits of what I do.
Oh, our Zia is in the front lounge of this tour bus right now, and she's been poring over numbers and you know, pages and pages of watching the books. We do everything. You know, we have to, whether we have a manager or not, at whatever given time, we always manage ourselves. Sometimes we have a manager, and sometimes we don't have a manager. But we are always managing everything from our insurance policies to, you know, our how much, you know, 80 hertz is in the kick drum. Everything. You know, you have to be DIY. I think if you want to truly be able to sleep comfortably at night. As an
You know, I was
artist.
going to say, after watching all the, now that all the documentaries are out, Billy Joel, everyone's like, did you know he got screwed by his man? I'm like, yeah, everybody does. Like,
Everybody did.
you know, everybody does, dude. And that's why they lived, you know, they dealt with, Beatles had a bad publishing contract so that U2 would get all their publishing with Island. You know, like, you know, they walked so we could run. Speaking of picture this, I know Josh and I were just talking about, I don't know how you feel about this, but because it was such an impactful thing when Dig came out, speaking of pictures and of editing and videos, it, you know, we were just talking about that because it remains one of the best music documentaries. And you guys, even though I know you were along for the entire ride, you almost unwittingly become the sort of the ruler by which we're going to measure sort of how Brian Jonestown Massacre is applying their career, you know, and having been in bands and seeing bands like coming up with like the Wallflowers and then seeing their career meteorically sort of rise,
Well,
you know, in an exponential level while things were falling.
They didn't come out of a scene. They came out of Bob Dylan's testicles, you know.
Right. Well, of course. But
So-
we were in the kibitz room and like we all played together and we like Rami when we started, like they were still playing, you know, obviously at any given moment a call could have gone out and said I'd like to have a record deal, but they were still sort of slagging around. But you guys were legitimately, I remember at the time Campfire Girls were out and they were like our contemporaries or like El Magnifico, like in LA. I don't know, you guys I think were still
Yeah, that was the early Silver Lake scene.
Yeah, and my cousin was in a band called Ludafisk, and there were like a bunch of other bands that
Rather
were around.
unappetizing.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, but that was the era, you know, of like, you know, the great unwashed down here of all of that. But when you guys started, when Dig happened, how was it pitched to you as it was going to be about one of the bands, or it was going to be following your career?
It was following 12 or 13 bands.
Oh,
And Anton, in his classic Anton fashion, took it over and told in no uncertain terms the lady that was filming it that it was going to be about his band and the Dandy Warhols, and that's it, or else we're going away. And we had very little to do with that movie, and it's, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, it's about the Brian Jonestown Massacre because they're by far the more interesting, wild, fucked up band. You know, we're just chopped in there. You know, I feel like I was told by a filmmaker in Portland because he saw it and I didn't, and he said it's an assassination piece. You guys got fucked, and we never saw it. You know, once again, a learning lesson in DIY. Our lawyer told us, "Oh, just sign it, sign the deal." No one ever sees these things.
wow.
Yeah. So we got.
I mean, I'm going to say you guys came out
we
well.
literally have never seen a penny for that movie. We got
Really?
we ripped off. Nobody to defend us, no one to protect us. You know, no one to go back in afterwards and go, "Hey, they signed this." You know, when they were on tour in Poland or wherever, and they were, you know, no one ever defends the bands. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I saw it and I was horrified. You know, it was just only because, but you know, but the good part is the Jonestown Massacre had no hope of having a lifelong career until Anton took that movie over and boss man, you know, it around, and it got how absolutely awesome their music was into the world forever. And that's really, I mean, we were doing very well. So that was really, you know, our concern mainly was like, yeah, we'll be in it because then, you know, this band will be seen by somebody. We had no idea how big it would be, but we figured someone would see it.
It's really, yeah, it's crazy because it's thought of even now amongst musician stuff. It's like it's one of those, like, it makes you feel better about where you're at because we were the house band at the Viper Room at that time, and I remember when I finally saw it and saw that they were like on stage at the Viper fighting to be like, oh my God, that's like my home stage. Like I knew these guys were around, but this is like happening like in my neighborhood. You know what I mean?
It's like toddlers, like a bunch of toddlers fighting over a donut.
And it was embarrassing. It wasn't even like, you know, here's they're on stage and you hear about like how somebody threw a cymbal, you know, how like the Who got in a fight. This was like one dude trying to kick another dude. Like Joel falling over an amp. Like it was just
Oh, they're still
like
doing that too. They're still doing that. There
shambolic.
was a fight recently, I think, that broke out and they were in the news. And I love that you said about, you know, like really getting their music out because it was, and you know, it was good kind of in the sense to get both of you, because I know a lot of people. I remember walking in to one of my film classes and the teacher one day was listening to the Dandy Warhols and then the next day was listening to Brian Jonestown. And it was, so it really did, like, you know, and it made, like, it puts you guys in a really good light and it puts your music out there. And then it was always funny hearing you talk about the Dave LaChapelle video, because in the documentary or in the movie, it was, you know, I could tell that you guys, you weren't happy, or if I'm wrong, but it was like, because you didn't feel like, you felt it was too bright, but what it
No,
did
no,
show.
we loved it. I was just pissed off that his little makeup artists. See, makeup artists need to have little jobs to do, otherwise they don't have a job at all. And so, little Buddy, put some kind of everything proof, whatever you call it, masking. I don't know what it is, but what do they call it exactly? Mascaras for your eyelashes. But he penciled my eyebrows into slugs or caterpillars or something. I very, you know, I used to have quite fine eyebrows, and was always glad to have some, you know, lovely young ladies tell me, "Oh my God, look at your eyebrows. I wish I had those," you know. And it was always, I was always happy about that. So for our first big video on Capitol Records, I didn't have my eyebrows. I had somebody else's big dumb eyebrows, and so that was basically it. Also, David trying to get like some kind of expression out of me. Was a not a very savvy directorial move, because it's just it just kind of ruined a bunch of junky, strung out vampires on stage with really pasty makeup on it. It just kind of, you know, it wasn't a whole idea for us. It didn't work out that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Sumptuous
so,
still. Yeah.
yeah, it was hard. We were still learning, but David was great. I mean, LaChapelle was a bombshell, man. He was like, at one point, one of the camera moves was incorrect, and one of his dancers got hurt. And you know, the guy's like, the cameraman or what? I don't know who was it. Somebody was bitching about how this is like a, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars this camera is, and fucking LaChapelle tore that sad little idiot a new one so hard in front of everyone. He was relentless, And he's like, this is my dancer's life. That's an entire life. What is the matter with you? And he was just, God, he was great. He was a powerhouse, man. I am so glad I worked with that guy. And I
love
think
that.
I got him too. I literally tore off a sheet of paper at Capitol Records and said, David, I would love to work with you on anything at any point in my life. This would mean a lot to me. I just put it on the fax machine, and Perry Watts Russell, our A&R guy, sent it to La Chappelle's manager, their agent or whatever they call that in the photo.
Yeah.
And Perry, I remember Perry saying, I don't think this is how things are done, Courtney. And but whatever, you're a different thing. So and it worked. They got a message back. They got a weird message, an equally weird message back. David says he'll do it. That's it. That's all they got. So I think that's what we were told the next day. I think this actually means he's going to do it, but we don't know. We're going to try to chase him down and see if we can, get it locked in. And of course, it was fine.
Isn't one of the takeaways from Dig though that y'all had your shit together and the Brian Jonestown massacre?
Yeah,
we're doomed to combust, basically. I mean,
yes, we could play shows, save money, rent a van, play local shows, save money, rent a van, enough to rent a van, and go on tour down the coast and back. We weren't in vans borrowed from friends that broke down, and we weren't junkies.
Right. And in its own way, it really was sort of like a DIY on how not to, as well as how to. When you watch the movie, you're like, yeah, that's entertaining, but I don't want that. I want that. I want to be able to go on the road and then come home and, have some money from merch and, having eaten on the road and not fucking lose our record contract every time we stop.
Right. Yeah. I guess we've never really had to care about the money. So in our minds, it was never, we definitely spend our money on the road and still do, making sure that we can get enough sleep.
Right.
We eat things we like. We're not eating garbage. We get to, and now, what really changed touring? I don't know if you guys were touring when this happened, but Whole Foods happened. And now you can get quinoa tabbouleh salad anywhere in America.
I was going to ask you that because I've been vegan for like 35 years. And when you put the line in Bohemian, like you, I took such shit the second, if you like vegan food, was like, because people didn't really say it. It was just kind of like what, there was like a subset. And I've been vegan for so long. And everyone's like, hey, like, because I toured through Cracker Barrel territory, eating a baked potato, everywhere we went, and finding like every college town that had like any kind of natural food place so that I could not die on the road. Right. So but when you go, if you like vegan food, I was like, I can't believe somebody put that into a song.
Did he just say vegan food in a song?
It was like perfect. Anyway, you want to get to Fade Away and Radiate, and then the big one, right?
Yeah, so we'll just mention this one, so we want to give Clem a shout out. As really the closest thing to a ballad on here, this is a dreamy and poetic and almost gothic in its imagery and features additional ambient guitar by King Crimson's Robert Fripp.
I did not know that.
Yeah, not to bring the room down, but staying with the gothic theme, we have to mention two rock heroes who we lost this year that are pertinent to this conversation. Clem Burke, Blondie's drummer and longest serving member besides Debbie and Chris, and the drummer for so many other projects, including some of the 500 artists, Bob Dylan, Ramones, Go-Go's, Iggy Pop, Pete Townsend, and so many others. He passed away from cancer in April. His versatility on this record alone is unparalleled. He was still so vibrant and powerful up until the end. And of course, we recently lost Ozzy in July. So it's just, we got to, mention some of the greats. But having Clem, he was so important to the group, right?
Yeah, in the early 2000s, we had a bar called Slabtown, and he hung out there a few times, but I was always on tour, and so I never got to meet him. But he was, you know, as a drummer growing up, he was such a big influence on me.
Not to skip over
Yeah.
everything, but Heart of Glass, originally written as one of Debbie and Chris's first songs in 74, 75, a slower but still funky song. They called Once I Had a Love, as well as the disco song. It went through many attempts and failures before becoming the classic Heart of Glass. They tried it as funky, a ballad, reggae, pop, before flirting with disco. This exploration of the fragility and disillusionment of love wasn't their first brush with disco. They had already had a few songs in that vein in their live set, as well as covering Donna Summer's 77 hit I Feel Love, which was co-written and produced by Giorgio Moroder. Yeah, Moroder. Who they admired and would later work with. Although Heart of Glass is now considered a classic disco song, the band was very influenced by Kraftwerk and other krautrock and electronic artists of the era. In fact, the original version on the record was soon replaced by the more obvious disco version we're all used to now, after producer Mike Chapman went back and modified it for greater dance floor and chart consumption. Yeah, I mean,
And we have to ask you, speaking of krautrock, you seem to be pretty versed in that, having done, done the graphic novel, that, but also you putting out a record for essentially a band that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I love that whole era, and I'm actually working on the movie in AI right now. I've got the first scene done. We just started a couple of weeks ago before I left on tour. And the first opening scene is done. It's 100% AI, which is very difficult. Really, 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 really difficult to do. And I'm wondering how long it's going to take to do this. But they invent new tools for us, basically monthly, that solve some of these AI film problems. But yeah, I love that era. It just, in my mind, it feels like such an exciting time. It also was horrifying because that was like hipster terrorism, which we know a lot about in Portland, and on a much weirder, bigger international scale than really anybody had done thus far. I mean, it's the Baader Meinhof gang was some serious Charlie Manson shit, and so that's my story. I invented a German art noise band that disappeared in 1978 and just put them in the end of the Baader Meinhof era. And it was cool making the record because really you can do whatever you want. That was Can and Noy and all those guys. That was an incredibly freed up music scene. They had nothing to go by. They were just limited to what they could get these synthesizers to do. And they couldn't, funny thing about I Feel Love, that's the first EDM hit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, the problem was, they could get it to do that for a few seconds. And then it would go or heat up and slow down and drop in pitch. And it was a symphonic composer conductor was screwing around with electronic music, electronic machinery, making music to integrate, which I'll probably have to do for the score to my film. But and he had a young assistant, Peter something, I believe, who worked it out one night. He figured it out how to keep the machine from overheating and a sequencer from dipping in tempo and tone. So I have a scene in the film where my main character Sebastian receives a note from Giorgio Moroder saying, we're big fans of your work, and I want you to hear something that we've done. I think we've broken some real ground, and you might be interested in it. So, being a bicycle enthusiast, he rides from his hometown of Mittenwald, 100 miles or so, to Munich to meet Giorgio, Donna, and then he hears the first successful completion of an EDM hit. And yeah, that's one of my favorite moments. It's like I'm getting kind of misty just thinking about it.
It's funny you mentioned that because on this song in particular, even though this sounds like an absolute sequenced Giorgio Moroder thing, the keyboards were done essentially by hand. All that sequence, all that.
Wow.
He had it. Jimmy Destri like had to ride the parts through because
He is the most underrated keyboardist in history. He was consistently cool, inventive, and perfect sonically. His stuff is still so cool. And even their first records, I went back and listened to all those a year ago or two, and his keyboards were always cooler than cool. They're fantastic. He was great. Is he still alive?
I forgot. One of them passed away. There was a great documentary. I have to look up Jimmy Destri. I thought Jimmy Destri was still alive, or maybe I forgot which one passed away.
He is.
Yeah,
71 years old.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was another. Yeah,
what was he, 12 when he got in that band?
Yeah, he was. I think he was like one of the younger guys in the band. He's born in '54. He's one of the younger guys in the band in the beginning. But yeah, I remember when. Yeah, there's a great. Is it? I forget if the documentary's on Jimmy or on the other guitar player, because Nigel joined later, because then Nigel wasn't there right from the beginning. He was, there was this New York sort of scene, we've had Lenny Kaye on before also from, the front end of that with all of that. But back to the sequencing thing, and that's the part, like the krautrock influence, for those of you that don't know, in Germany, it was another reason that Bowie went to Berlin, was that he was sort of chasing this thing that was happening at the time. If you listen to Station, which was actually recorded on Fairfax, right up the street at Cherokee, in his LA cocaine and milk era, he does that.
Milk and cocaine diet.
Yeah, and then he moves to Berlin to try to get clean. But Josh, when you were just there and you're like, what should I see out here? I was like, go to Connie Plank's studio. Like, go, if you're out there, go see like where all of this stuff happened. You can literally look out the window and see where he saw.
Oh yeah.
Well, you'd have to know his room. You'd have to get his. He had a piano in his room, and he was trying to kick heroin, so he was up all night. And then he would see a couple. One would show up first. One would show up then the other, every single night. And so he started riffing on "Waiting for My Man" because he couldn't sleep because he's trying to kick dope. And he's playing and he's just slowly waiting for my man, and then he'd look out the window and there they go. And he told me that he actually, and I love this is so Benny Hill, he actually snuck out to see who it was. He snuck up on him and he hid behind trees. Imagine David hiding behind a tree and then running to another tree and waiting. I mean, God, it's comedy gold.
Yeah.
Nobody's made a little, YouTube.
Well, we were told it was Tony
short
Visconti and his side lady was what at least that's the folklore about that. And I was going to say, you got to work with David.
It was, and May Peng was the lady.
Yeah, they ended up together. Yeah, May and him ended up together. We did that, Ben, if I'm looking at the poster now.
Well, that would have been where it would have been where it started then.
It's so wild. Yeah, I know it was a side thing that he had in Berlin because he had a wife somewhere or whatever. But I know Josh, I know we don't have a lot of time, but you worked with Debbie on the last album. I mean, you did work with Bowie, and I would love to hear everything, or at least, you perform. He handpicked you to open for him, which I can't imagine the honor.
We worked in his studio on Monkey House with Tony and David, and then David came out to Portland and came into our studio, and we fucked around in there a bunch and stuff. He's just always been a guy that he's just wants to find out what makes you tick if he likes your music. What you were just saying about going to Berlin. this is new. I want to know why this. I love this. Why? You know, that was his thing.
Mm-hmm.
Was it intimidating?
David was old. You know, he seemed really old. He was like probably younger than I am now. But he seemed very old, and so it wasn't as intimidating as if to know Bowie at 28 years old, or
Sure.
the intense. That David was different than knowing a middle-aged David. You know? So it was he was very wise by that point. He wouldn't really get drunk with us and stupid, you know.
The elder statesman.
Very much so.
Yeah. What about Debbie? Like, how does that happen? How do you go like, hey, do you want to sing on our?
You just get a hold of, our manager gets a hold of their manager, and then, it sends them the song, right? Chris heard the song, I guess, first, and said, Debbie, this is cool. This is really cool. You want to do this? And, but, everybody has a studio, right? Nowadays. So you just send them the stuff and they record it. But I don't know if Debbie even remembers this, but she and I and my cousin drummer and Ice-T hung out in New York City in the early 2000s. And I don't know if she'd even remember me, but, I guess that's what kind of made it seem like it might be possible to get her to do it. But my manager I had sang her part in a falsetto voice, and it was very coarse, and I wanted it, to be a more ethereal and truly, angelic, kind of darkly angelic thing. And my manager said, well, if you could get anyone, who would it be? And I said, well, of course, Debbie Harry. And he goes, he goes, okay, you know her? And I said, well, I hung out with her once, long ago. And he goes, well, whatever. I'll let me see what they say, And yeah, apparently Chris heard it, and it really was that was the clincher. And God, it just had the weirdest thing in New York when we were there earlier this year. I was just walking down the street, and I look across the street, and there's just the classic, like New York block. And I just took a picture of it, and I said, I know this doesn't seem very exciting if you're not familiar with New York, but to be back here and just see a street that's so blatantly cliche New York. And our guy posted it, and within an hour, Chris Stein got back and said, that's the building we lived in. That's the one.
Wow.
That was really weird. Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, I want to say something about Heart of Glass. Another thing is there are the electronics in that are those old like home Wurlitzer.
Oh, I always thought that was a rhythm master. Is that like an old organ? Like the
I don't know, but if you listen to it, it's those kinds of sounds, and it's those are drum sounds from like the 1950s.
Yeah. It was like for you to play along with.
Yep.
Like a metronome.
Or at church or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they
practice alone without it. Yeah.
Push a button and it's bossa nova.
Yeah, Sly Stone made a huge, when he started working with that around Riot, that was just Family Affair and all of that stuff that had that. That's why even to this day when I DJ that stuff, when you just hear it at the beginning of it, it's just that anticipation before it drops, where it reminds me of like those moments of like even like a Bohemian or on like Girls and Boys by Blur, when you just hear that doo dee doo dee doo dee, like you're like, here we go. Yeah. Now all they do is do drops and repeats, but at the time it was just like
those soft puffy sounds and really incredibly good grooves.
Yeah.
Oh my, if you get a chance, watch, especially as a drummer, but everybody, if you haven't seen it, there's a live version of Blondie at contemporary to when this would have been like what they were touring, where they play like an 8-minute version of Heart of Glass live. They're on some show, and Clem, who always looked like Keith Moon, who's wearing like the mod shirt with like a, you know, with like an RAF or like an arrow or something. What people don't understand is it's the disco song, but it's a live band. This is so much closer to like what, I mean, I hate to fall back on these Britpop or these bands, but where nowadays you would think of like a band as being like, if it's a synthesizer band, it's all sequenced, it's all recorded, it's all. But Duran Duran and these other bands played live with some of these things. I know you work with Nick Rhodes, but you know, with guys that like added synth parts, but they didn't give up on it being a rock band, and that's with Blondie. He never stops. What's the unsung hero of Heart of Glass is that he's doing those like during the song, he's doing those fills in a essentially like what you would think of as a krautrocky kind of disco. Even Can, those are live bands. You know, we've lost a lot. I mean, New Order is a live band. You know, they had the same issue where they couldn't get the sequencing to work.
Yeah,
Blue Monday.
Can's drummer is what a feel. I mean,
monster.
Our walk-on music is and he's got that shuffly whip-like jazz thing, but it sounds super modern too now to my ear.
It's freaky. I still listen to that and go, what were they like, where were they here? Because it was still 71, 72, 73. You're like,
what did they
like, it wasn't Zeppelin. You know what I mean? Like, what were they like?
Right.
Where did that come from? That they were like, well, we'll do minimalistic, but then we'll have this like one guy, and then somebody will just be singing like. And I go, and that's the thing about Heart of Glass is we think of it as a disco song because that's all we knew. Not us, but you know, all we knew at the time. It is so krautrock when you approach it that way that you go, well, listen to like this Can thing or Noy or whatever. Now listen to Heart of Glass.
The most disco element of it though is actually the goomba goomba goomba.
Yeah, Nigel's bass line.
Is the disco standard bass run, and other than that, you know, it doesn't strike me particularly. And it might be because of my age. I fall kind of too young to really lump it in with disco. And then by the time I became a savvy music listener, it was, you know, and a producer, it was 84. And I was in high school, and then I could really hear what it is and really be like, you know, how did that happen? It's amazing.
Yeah, I remember seeing them in Solid Gold and being like, you know, at the time when that was like a TV show, you know, in the 70s to 80s, where it was like, with the LeMay Gold and them doing the whole thing. And they would have like Debbie Harry is on doing Heart, and she was all coked up, but it was just her like with a soft focus, lip syncing. And I was like, what? And it was already a little later than the song had already been. It was almost like she just came back on and lip synced that. But I remember thinking like, oh yeah, that's kind of like what this dance thing is that's going on right now. But like, I urge you guys, now you've heard Heart of Glass a million times. Listen to that. Listen to I Feel Love, and then listen to Heart of Glass, and you'll be like, there's that Giorgio Moroder, like them imitating what they thought that sounded like. You know, that krautrock thing with a real drummer and a kind of synthy, you know, it's like all that stuff. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I wonder. I often, you know, wonder or believe if the greatest pieces of music or even art are failed attempts to imitate some lesser piece of music that they happen to love.
And I think that's, you know, listen, if you can do anything and get inspired, and then you come back to it and people are like, well, that started an entire industry. You know what I mean? Like, how did Revolver happen? You know what I mean? Like, Revolver just happened. Here's Rubber Soul. They're playing acoustic guitar. Next thing you know, they're doing loops because Paul's listening to Stockhausen. And, you know, this guy's doing this. And now, hey, these guys are using horns. Fuck it. We can do that too.
Yeah, I get the feeling with krautrock, I get the feeling almost everything was done because they could. You know, all that electronic shit was done simply because they could. and maybe they couldn't do something else, so they did this because they could get the keyboard, the synthesizer to do this. And I talked when I did my story, my graphic novel, and the screenplay and all that stuff. I got together with Carl Bartos, and it was funny because I was really excited about this era, and he said he in no uncertain terms told me that it was not exciting, it was not fun, it was boring, and you should probably make a movie about what you think it was like.
Wow. By the way, for those listening, he's a member of Kraftwerk, just so that
and I believe he invented the drum trigger pad. That was Carl.
So they could have a real drummer play electronic sounds.
Yeah.
It's just so innovative for what they are. Like, I'm telling you guys, go see, especially after Clem passing and Ozzy passing, go see every one of these legacy artists. I say this every time. Josh says this every time. That these guys, every time they come to town, Paul McCartney's playing. If you can get there, go see Paul McCartney, because he's the only one that did it. He's 83, played last night. I know people that went. We know it's Paul McCartney and he sounds the way he sounds, but dude, that's it. When
I
he's
just
gone,
saw Willie Nelson, 93. I saw Willie Nelson, and
that's
that was one of the coolest. It sounds like he's got his son in there, who's a very spaghetti western guitar player, and there's not a lot of straight country in his set. It's very art school. I mean, it sounds like the hippest Glasgow art cool guy band trying to do the Texas sound of country or something. It's way hip. He only played one song with a snare backbeat. Everything had these kind of Mexi Cubano beats, and it was just so. I have no idea. It's so hip, because his voice will give out. He has to do this half sing, half talk, so it gets this very New York, Lou Reed kind of. It's so hip. Willie Nelson has never been as hip as he is at 93. I swear to God, it's so cool. It's amazing. And him with Bob Dylan and then Billy Strings going on first was just a spectacular night. That was one of the greatest tours I've ever gone to.
I love that.
That's fantastic. So Josh, you want to do lightning round?
So we're good. So thank you so much for coming on, Courtney. We appreciate it. We ask everybody these questions. What's your favorite song on this record?
Well, One Way or Heart of Glass.
All right. Is there anything you skip over, or is this a no skip record?
There's I was one of the songs, and I can't remember which one it is, blatantly sounds like it created the Strokes to me. And it's on this record.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that on this record.
Yeah, because they really, and I'm curious about the songwriting. I never really dug into it, because some of them, they do all those 1950s chord changes and melodies, and then sometimes they don't. They're just rock.
They covered Buddy Holly on this record, and then they did two Nerve songs.
Okay.
Yeah, the I Love You Too, or whatever that one's called, is an old Buddy. The Gonna Love You Too, that has like the gang vocal thing. Yeah. Dad!
Yes.
That's
I
Buddy Holly.
That one. Okay, but that's not the one. There's one that is just, to me, that every time I hear it, I go, that is.
Maybe Just Go Away, the last song on the record, might be one of them. Because the other one sounds like Sunday Girl, sounds like a girl group sort of thing.
Sweet 50s style.
Yeah, gotta love all that stuff.
Wave.
Yeah. Is there anything on this album? Yeah.
Okay, anyway, continue. Next question.
Is there anything on this record that you skip over, or is it like a no skip record?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything I'd skip over on it.
Right on. All right. Can you fuck to this record?
No, I can't.
Right on. And what would be your elevator pitch to get someone to listen to this record, bud?
Oh, I would just list the hits, I'd go, come on, Sunday Girl, Fade Away Radiate, part of class, one week another, I mean, that's a kind of no-brainer. It's easy to just, I probably have told people to listen to it by saying that.
Totally. All right, promote away, buddy. What do you got going on? Where can we find you? I know you guys are on tour right now, but please promote away.
With Coolest Shaker. I saw that. Sorry, just wanted to. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's sort of like, I feel like it's like Deep Purple and T-Rex on tour together in '73. We've
Rad.
got so much vintage equipment, and they're so proggy, and that big Hammond B3 sound, and then we've got the breathy vocals and the slutty grooves that just go, and the vocal harmonies that just go for a long time. It's a cool tour. We're having a really good time. The guys are just so cool. They've also been the same band forever, the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And they covered Deep Purple. Hush. They actually have a cover of that.
Right, that's right. They do. I keep forgetting that. That's their second to the last song every night. And yeah, they're a great band. They're also, I think we both had our first in '96 or '97 maybe. Yeah, Junkie. So they were a year ahead of us. So I guess they're the seniors and we're the juniors. But yeah, we're gonna hit the LA area in just a minute, like tomorrow, I think.
Oh, you're kidding?
We do Pioneer Town, we do LA, we do Santa Ana and San Diego, and so that's where we're, we'll probably just get a hotel in LA and just shack up and just run around to the different areas and hit these other gigs.
Oh, far out. If you guys are out, go by Good Times at Davy Wayne's. I DJ there. Stop by.
Go where?
Good Times at Davy Wayne's, 70s bar. I play all 70s, beat mitts and everything. But yeah, dude, if you guys are in town, I'll see if I can try to come check you guys out. That would,
that name one more time.
Good Times at Davy Wayne's on El Centro between Hollywood and Selma. It's an all 70s bar owned by the Houston brothers.
Davy Wayne's Good Times.
Good Times at Davy Wayne's.
Good Times. It's a great place.
Good Times.
Yeah. Anytime you need a baby. I was also going to say, just if you want to plug, just put your so where everybody can find you, because if you follow your Instagram.
We'll promote it. We'll promote.
Right,
Don't worry about it. Yeah, we got it. We're going to promote it at the beginning and the end also.
I've never been on social media in my life.
You're not missing anything.
Lucky you.
All right. I fear people.
Right on.
And,
all right.
Yeah, I mean, we're I'm sure it's all everywhere. Facebook. Is that the old one?
That's the old. That's the one that the kids.
That's the old one.
Are still being on.
Insta, TikTok. As the numbers reduce and the years you go Insta or TikTok.
Hey, Courtney, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. I can't thank you enough. Dude, if you guys come to the area or if they're in your area, please go see the Dandy Warhols. The new record's great. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much for, picking me as, the pinch hitter